After having a private audience with the Maharishi, all three Beatles agreed to join the Guru and his travelling band of disciples the following day and travel to Bangor on the North Wales coast to spend the August bank holiday weekend at a transcendental seminar. For John, it had been an instant conversion. Like a group of rich hippies, young, carefree partygoers off on a weekend jaunt, the Beatles met the next afternoon at Euston Station to take the train to Bangor. Among them was Mick Jagger, having now been released from jail after just one night in a cell and pending an appeal, and Marian Faithfull. As it happened, for once Brian had been invited too, but had declined. He had another, more temporal kind of weekend in mind. Naturally, the press, presumably alerted by the Maharishi's publicist, were there in force to see the new converts off. Quickly, however, the departure turned into a scrum, with the result that Cynthia was left behind with the luggage. She hurried along the platform, but could only watch as, with John at a carriage window shouting to her, the train pulled away. Once again she had been left behind, this time in front of a mob of photographers, whose cameras snapped away as she burst into tears. It wasn't just dismay that she'd missed the train that upset her. That moment was symbolic in the rapidly unravelling state of her marriage. Neil Aspinall, of course, was there to drive her up to Bangor, which she reached not long after the main party had arrived. But John was irritated with her, rather than comforting. "Why are you always last, Sin?" he chided. As usual, she swallowed her feelings. She'd been left out of so much of the Beatles' careers for so long, she hadn't known how to fight for her place. In Bangor, it was a bizarre weekend for everyone, finding on arrival that their accommodation was in a hostel at the University College of Wales, which meant 2 single beds in the rooms. But it was a funny, student-like adventure, too. They enjoyed it. In fact, so exhilarated were they by the whole transcendental experience that the next day the Beatles put out a public statement renouncing the use of drugs, which amused Neil and Mal no end. Not only did it seem unlikely in the extreme that any of them would be able to forsake drugs for very long, it was less than a month since they'd all signed a full-page advertisement in the Times calling for the legalization of marijuana, and which, incidentally, Brian, anxious to be seen to be supporting his boys after Paul's LSD admission, had paid for. The Maharishi, absolutely thrilled by the massive publicity he was getting, did his stuff by giving everyone a secret individual mantra as a going-home present. Then, on the Sunday lunchtime, the fun came to an end, when the payphone in the college refectory rang. Jane Asher answered it. It was Peter Brown, asking if he could speak to Paul. The phone was passed to the Beatle. "I've got bad news," Peter said. "Brian is dead." The television news film of John's expression that was broadcast that night showed a washed-out, almost vacant face as a TV reporter tried to get some response from him. "Where would you be today if it wasn't for Mr. Epstein?" the reporter asked. "I don't know," John said. What else could he say? All afternoon, details of Brian's death had been reaching him and the others. Brian's alternative plan for the weekend had involved a party at his new country house in Sussex. But when some boys, intended as the weekend's entertainment, hadn't arrived, he'd become depressed and had driven back to London alone. With his Bentley still parked outside his home in Chapel Street, Belgravia, on the Sunday morning, and finding his bedroom door locked, his Spanish butler, Antonio, had telephoned his secretary, Joanne Newfield. Together with Alistair Taylor, who had been on Brian's staff since they'd worked together selling records in Liverpool, the door had been forced. Brian's body was curled up in his bed. "I understand that the Maharishi comforted you all," pursued the television reporter. "Can I ask what advice he offered?" "He just told us not to be overwhelmed with grief," John replied. "And whatever thoughts we have of Brian, to keep them happy. Because whatever thoughts we have of him will travel with him, wherever he is." And with that, he got into a car to be driven back to London. The unexpected death of those he loved was not a new experience for him. Pictures of Brian travelled with him in his mind's eye that night on the 200-mile drive home.